Hello everyone, welcome to John Redmann, Power of Attorney, the show that aims to empower you through knowledge of the law. I'm attorney John Redmann.
And hello everybody, I'm Shauna Sanford. Welcome to the show. Today is part 2 of our conversation about what has been called an unprecedented lawsuit against 97 oil and gas companies. They're accused of destroying much of Louisiana's coastal wetlands.
Joining us are two men that are leading the charge. They are John Berry, Vice President of the Louisiana Flood Protection Authority East, and Attorney Gladstone Jones, the prosecuting attorney for the coastal erosion lawsuit.
And we are, of course, anxious to talk to them, and we'll do that in just a few moments. But we know that a lot of experts have really looked at the amount of damage caused by the oil and gas companies, and there seems to be a lot of dispute over exactly how much, anywhere from 20% to 70%. So when you look at that and the experts can't really agree on it, then how is a judge or possibly how is a jury supposed to find out, the extent of the damage?
Well, that's going to be a huge area or focus of the debate. And what typically happens, like in any lawsuit, is each side in the debate, the oil companies versus the flood protection side, they're going to have their opportunity to have experts come to trial. They're going to argue about it. They're going to put their charts up on their easels, or they're going to have their PowerPoint presentations at trial, and they're going to debate it. The lawyers who are opposing those experts are going to have the opportunity to cross-examine them. And at the end of the day, the judge or the jury, and I'm not certain if it's going to be a jury in this case, I think it may end up being a judge, they're going to get to weigh the testimony and the evidence provided by each side and decide which expert opinions they agree with and decide what percentage. And that's assuming they get to decide damages. It might not get that far.
Okay, well, we will see. And of course, we have our guests coming up, John Berry and Attorney Gladstone Jones. They will join Power of Attorney, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
I am for the child who lives in motels, cars, and shelters, now in foster care, a group home, where he sleeps not on a bed, but on a temporary cot. He is the child I am for. I am a CASA volunteer. I am you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. For decades, there has been an ongoing debate over who should be held responsible for damaging the coastal wetlands. A groundbreaking lawsuit has been filed against the oil and gas industry, and the backlash against it has come from top state officials, including Governor Bobby Jindal. The lawsuit was filed by the Southeast Louisiana Flood Protection Authority East. And we started this conversation last week, and we are continuing it today.
John Berry is here with us. He's the board's vice president, and Attorney Gladstone Jones, who is lead counsel who filed the lawsuit. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here.
We really appreciate your time. And of course, we want to say that we did invite the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority Chairman Garrett Graves to join this program. He declined to be on the show today. We also extended an invitation to Keith Jarrett. He's the lead defense counsel for Exxon to come and join us, but we never did get a response from them. So we just want to be very open about the fact that we did reach out to the opposition to be a part of this conversation. We started this last week. We're continuing the conversation today. Explain to us why this lawsuit and why now?
Well, it's very simple. Our authority is responsible for flood protection in the New Orleans metro area on the East Bank. And the increase in the cost to us and the increase in the risk to the public to protect people's lives is partly due to the destruction of the buffer zone, the land that's outside the levee. And the oil and gas industry is responsible for part of the destruction, not all of the destruction, but a significant part of the destruction of that buffer zone. So that increases the storm surge that comes against the levee system and makes it harder and more expensive to protect people's lives. It makes it more dangerous for people inside the flood protection system. So we are seeking to have the industry either repair the damage that they have done so that that storm surge goes back down, or in cases in areas where that's not possible, we would like them to give us some money so we can augment the flood protection system to compensate for the increased risks that they've created.
Now, we have some maps that we want to show folks so they can get a real clear understanding of what could potentially happen if nothing is done to repair the damage that has already taken place. This is the year 2050, and Glad, if you could explain this and talk a little bit more about what John just mentioned in terms of if how this all works with the master plan that's on the table, this $50 billion master plan.
Right. Well, let me just say that some of these maps that we're going to show you today have been developed by outside the context of this lawsuit. These are scientists, government scientists, oil and gas scientists. So these are things that we looked at when we were researching the viability of this lawsuit. The master plan is a plan that John Barry and his group have applauded as being and participated in developing, along with the oil and gas industry and scientists from the states and from the federal government. And it's kind of a consensus of what needs to be done to protect the South Louisiana from the destruction of this coastline. And a heck of a lot of work had gone into putting it together. They have identified the causes, the crisis that's coming, and what the fix should be. And in short, all of those scientists from the state, the federal government, the oil and gas scientists, the various levee boards have come up with a plan that is going to cost somewhere between $50 billion and $100 billion to protect our coastal communities. The plan, as I said, is terrific. It's well thought out. The problem is that there's no money for that plan, or there's very little money for that plan. And so the genesis of this lawsuit in discharging their responsibility to the people of the greater New Orleans is to provide if the oil companies can't fix what they agreed to fix when they operated in our area, to provide a funding mechanism that will assist in saving South Louisiana.
Right, just on the east bank of the Mississippi River in Metro New Orleans, the master plan would call for $9 billion in spending just to keep things basically where they are now, maybe a little bit better improvement. So that is an enormous burden that the state and our flood protection authority is faced with when we look at the out years. There's no funding mechanism. Obviously, we can't raise that kind of money through millage. So the industry did, by its own admission, contribute to the land loss, which is partly responsible for the $9 billion in the master plan in this area. And we have never expected or asked for them to address the entire problem. All we have ever asked them to do is to fix the part of the problem that they created.
So if nothing is done today, we just saw that map with all of the red area, and that's area that would actually disappear if things continue as they are today. And without any funding for that master plan, we're still right back to square one. So if you are in fact successful with this lawsuit in getting the oil companies to do what they said they would do in getting the permits here, would that picture change significantly?
It would change somewhat, yeah, and we would be, I think, much safer. We don't know how much money would come. We don't know how much of the area they would have to sort of retrofix, if there is such a word. You know, we do not, I mean, we do know this, there's no way that any money that we would get from this would pay for the entire master plan in our area. The liability is not that great, but it is still very great.
Well, and just to sort of fill out the picture here, you're not saying that 37 years from now we are going to have a problem. There's a problem right now with our wetlands.
Absolutely.
We've lost a lot of land.
1,900 square miles in the last 70 years or so.
So,
John, in the time that we finish this program, we will lose another 100-yard football field. out there in this coastal marsh. I mean, the problem is happening every single day. You don't one day wake up and end up in the situation depicted in the 2050 map. It is a gradual, day by day by day, and unless there's a funding mechanism, that progression of damage will not stop, and it is that damage that we're trying to stop, so that these coastal communities, particularly in this case, the Greater New Orleans, will have a fighting chance to maintain itself.
Right. So the problem that started about 85 years ago, 90 years ago, when oil companies started digging canals, dredging canals, and digging for oil and gas in the wetlands there. It's gotten to the point now where it's very serious, to the point where your board decided they needed to file this lawsuit.
Unanimously, a board of scientists we have on the board. His title used to be Director of Floodplain Management for the state of California. Is one board member. Another from North Carolina is the co-author of the most sophisticated storm surge plan. It's a group of real flood experts.
And frankly, somebody didn't wake up one day and, as an afterthought or with the benefit of 20/20 hindsight, say, hey, wait a minute, these oil companies did damage, shouldn't we ask them to repair it? Weren't there, as part and parcel of the deal, didn't the oil companies have an understanding, a written agreement? In fact, as a matter of law, were they not required to fix whatever they damaged when they were done doing their drilling?
Let me address that. There's two levels of obligations that the oil companies have. One is just a kind of a general coastal management regulations that apply to all oil companies operating on our coastline. And it's a very sensible, reasonable, and logical rule. It provides that after operations are completed, the oil companies have an obligation to detoxify and restore those areas where they operated in. So what that means is they have to fix what they broke, put it back to the way it was when they went out there and before they went out there and extracted our natural resources. Over and above that general law that applies to all of them, certain oil companies, or most all oil companies, entered into permits with the Army Corps of Engineers that said in various forms that we promise when we go out and we cut through these marshes and drill for this oil, that what we will do at the end when we're finished is we will properly plug and abandon and restore those areas. Now I'm paraphrasing 100 years worth of permits, but that's the essential idea.
Can we get a picture up on the screen of some of the wetlands as they look today? Some of the marshlands.
So we do have some photographs.
The photos of the wetlands.
Yeah, this is a photograph that's on our screen now, which kind of shows, and is but one example of thousands that we have. You can see the pipelines running on the screen, and you can see where they were not maintained, and then you see big open bodies of water on either side. That's not the way that this place looked like 100 years ago. What that looked like was one solid mat of marsh, coastal area. Here's another example. You can see the pipelines, but you can see on the outside of those where they had not been maintained. And when I say not been maintained, there's not a contiguous line bank. And when those banks fall apart, that salt water that runs from the Gulf of Mexico runs up there, and that marsh just can't handle that salt water.
Too much salt in the water.
Too much salt in the water kills the marsh. It's very, very, very simple.
Okay,
it kills the plants and the animal life.
Yeah.
We are going to have to take a quick break. This first segment has just flown by once again, but we have to take a quick break. When we come back, we have questions from our viewers, and we will get to those questions in just a moment, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
I needed help finding a doctor.
Pace.
I needed help with my medication.
Pace.
I needed help getting around.
The Shirley Landry Benson Pace Center is a place that helps seniors remain in their homes, providing the care they need. If you or a family member are over 55 years old, you may be eligible for benefits offered by PACE. For more information, contact us at 504-835-0006. PACE, caring for those who cared for us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Our guests today are John Berry. He's the Vice President for the Southeast Louisiana Flood Protection Authority East, at least for now, at the time of this taping, and also lead counsel for the coastal erosion lawsuit, Gladstone Jones. It's time now to take your questions, and we're going to get to our questions because we have lots of them. And our first one comes from Susan. She says, how can someone prove the extent of big oil's damage compared to the damage from, say, the jetties or the levees? Who wants to take that one, John?
Well, there are multiple causes. The jetties that carry sediment out into deep water for the benefit of international commerce. That sediment used to be available to rebuild the marsh, and the levees, same thing. That statewide, the U.S. Geological Survey, with oil and gas industry scientists participating in the study, concluded that on average statewide, there was 36% of the land loss could be attributed to the industry. Now that is a very significant proportion. It varies from place to place. In some places it's almost zero, in some places it's well over 80%. There are studies that put it as high as 90% in some areas. So it's going to go place to place. It's not an easy thing to do, but there are ways that it can be done, and that will be a war of expert witnesses at the trial.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know, when you hear those numbers, you maybe think one thing, but to see it is really pretty amazing. And we have a map, another map that we're going to bring up, 2100, and you can actually see the areas that could actually disappear.
Yeah, and let me just follow up on John's point, and I'll go right to the map. These cases are always fought over the science, and I have experts, and the other side will have experts, but this case is extraordinary. It's incredibly extraordinary in that really the oil and gas companies don't deny that they caused a lot of this damage. In fact, they were part of the process that put together the master plan that said that the right fix here is $50 billion. So we start with an acknowledgement that oil and gas has caused some damages. But what the case will really focus on, and what we're concerned about, and what is hard to sometimes get your arms around, is this map that we have in 2100.
Mm-hmm.
If you have that, this map shows the greater New Orleans area and to the west. But what it demonstrates is it demonstrates all the communities that are south of New Orleans: Grand Isle, Fouchon, Dulac. All of these towns, if nothing is done, are going to vanish. They're going to be in the Gulf of Mexico. And all that means to the communities, churches, businesses, people that have grown up in those areas, are natural resources in Louisiana: fishing, tourism, that industry. All of those areas are going to be decimated unless something is done. Now, John and SLPFA and his levy authority discharged what they believed was their fiduciary obligation to protect greater New Orleans. But the truth needs to be told by our state leadership to all of those people that live in those various little towns what the consequences are here. This is far too important of a case to play politics with, in my view. I've been in political cases before. We're ready for them. But the truth should be told to the people of South Louisiana about what the consequences are going to be.
So that map that shows what's going to happen in the next 80 plus years, that's not a map prepared by one of your hired gun experts.
That's scientists outside, nothing to do with the lawsuit. Now, let me make an important point. The problem is those maps indicate is statewide. Mm-hmm. And one solution that I have repeatedly called for is, I don't agree with the governor on many things, but the reality is, for the coast, up to his opposition of this lawsuit, I've regarded him as a very good governor for the coast. What I would love for the governor to do would become a great governor for the coast, and maybe go down as one of the greatest governors in the state's history. If he tells the industry it's time for them to sit down and come to the table and make a major contribution to solving the statewide problem that goes well beyond our jurisdiction. The damage to our west from the industry is much more than the damage within our jurisdiction. And I would really love for there to be a statewide solution. And obviously that would require a major contribution from the industry, but then we would have the money to fund this master plan and protect people's lives and protect those communities.
Is this lawsuit going to break the backs of the oil industry? I mean, can they afford to pay a judgment?
I think that they can pay a judgment. I mean, there are 97 companies involved in this. No one is responsible for all of the damages. But really, I mean, the question should be is, will they do it? Will they step up and do the right thing and acknowledge the damage that they've done? I think John has been on the record many times as being very flexible. Nobody wants to run the oil business out of Louisiana. John has said, and John Berry has said, and I agree, the oil industry has been very important to the state of Louisiana in terms of
I used
jobs.
to work for one of the defendants.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Where's the money going to come from if not out of the suit to fix this problem?
Well, I think I think that is a great question for Governor Jindal and Mr. Graves. Where is the money going to come from? And are you going to tell the people of South Louisiana the truth about what the consequences are going to be?
I can tell you where they say it's coming from is taxpayers. And it seems odd to me that this anti-tax governor believes that taxpayers should pay for damage done by the most profitable industry on earth. It's a great puzzle to me.
One of the things that the governor says he specifically has issues with is the allegation made in the lawsuit that the oil and gas industry does not participate in the state's restoration efforts. He says that that's just totally incorrect. And he points out to a number of restoration and levee projects that are actually being built on industry property and with industry assistance. What do you say to that?
Well, I think in a technical sense that's true. Our claim, I mean, they're more mitigating what they're doing right now, however, rather than going back and fixing damage that was created earlier. The operations that are underway, as a general rule, are performed in much better fashion than anything they did in the past.
Let me add to that. We have said in the context of this lawsuit that any of these oil companies that are operating inside of this jurisdiction of this levee authority, if they've restored their area, come forward, come show us, and it will be the legal team's recommendation to the board to let them out immediately. But if they don't, and if they had not, they should plan, unless they want to do the right thing, they should plan for a long litigation battle, because the consequences of not having the money are too dire for the state of Louisiana.
And we just want to be clear, when we were talking about this, it's taken you about a year to get to this point of filing this lawsuit. Initially, you looked at 300 companies and you whittled it down to 97. How did that come about?
Well, we looked at all the oil companies that operated south of New Orleans in this jurisdiction. Many of them had combined, had merged their operations together. Some were no longer financially viable. So that's how the lawsuit originally went from 300 down to approximately 100 or 97.
Okay, all right. We have a question from Casey who says, how is the board to continue its non-political position when government is trying to control its behavior?
Well, I mean, we are independent, and even if I'm replaced, the other board members are just going to continue to do the business, which is, trying to protect people's lives. What the CPRA, the governor's office, seems to think we're supposed to do is simply look after the existing levee system. No one on our board thinks our job is to do nothing but look after the levee system that is being handed to us by the Corps. We think our job is to protect people's lives and property. And therefore, we feel our responsibility is a good deal broader than simply to turn a key in a lock, essentially.
Are you surprised by the opposition and how strong the backlash has been, particularly from the governor?
I'm honestly surprised at the governor's opposition. Clearly, we expected tremendous opposition from the industry. And from other politicians, some in the state legislature, many of whom actually run oil companies themselves. But we were surprised by the governor's office, largely because we alerted Garrett Graves, his chief person on these issues, in December of 2012 what we intended to do, and he attended 2 executive sessions of our board discussing it, and we never got the sense from him. He never blessed what we were doing, don't get me wrong. He didn't say, I'm all for it. But although he did once say, our lawsuit has merit to me, he said that to me. But, he knew about it, And we didn't get any indication there was going to be the kind of violent opposition from him and from the governor in all 8 months before we filed.
I'll just add to that that it's the first lawsuit I've ever filed at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I've had a governor come out and ask me to pull it down at 4:30 at the same afternoon. I think that we have been surprised at the pushback, but when we've taken a few steps back and we understand the consequences, and we understand what's at stake, and we understand how honorable and how much courage this levee authority has shown in taking this bold action to hold oil responsible, it's all worth doing. We seriously hope that the governor will come around, that he'll reconsider his position and understand that given the fact that the oil companies essentially acknowledge that they caused damage, given the permits that are out there that say exactly what they had to do, given the state law that says that they have an obligation to restore, that this is a meaningful step in the direction of protecting coastal Louisiana. And how politically you can oppose that. You may not like lawsuits, you may not like people attacking oil companies, but this is about people's lives and about people's property. And what they need to be done is we need to tell them the truth, that if we're going to oppose the lawsuit, we need to tell them why and what is their plan. And to date, 90 days after filing this lawsuit, we have not heard a logical, reasonable explanation that they have a better plan to protect South Louisiana.
And we're going to have to let that be the last word. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the program. We have learned a lot. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have this week on Power of Attorney. Many thanks to our great guests and to you all for being here with us. Be sure to tune in next week for another great show.
Be sure to visit our website for more information. That's johnredmannpoa.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Gentlemen.